Today's passage is Psalm 35, verses 17 through 28. Let's read together. How long, Lord, will you look on? Rescue me from their ravages, my precious life from these lions. I will give you thanks in the great assembly. Among the throngs I will praise you. Do not let those gloat over me who are my enemies without cause. Do not let those who hate me without reason maliciously wink the eye. They do not speak peaceably, but devise false accusations against those who live quietly in the land. They sneer at me and say, "Aha! Aha! With our own eyes we have seen it." Lord, you have seen this. Do not be silent. Do not be far from me, Lord. Awake and rise to my defense. Contend for me, my God and Lord. Vindicate me in your righteousness. Lord my God, do not let them gloat over me. Do not let them think, "Aha! Just what we wanted," or say, "We have swallowed him up." May all who gloat over my distress be put to shame and confusion. May all who exalt themselves over me be clothed with shame and disgrace. May those who delight in my vindication shout for joy and gladness. May they always say, "The Lord be exalted, who delights in the well-being of his servant." My tongue will proclaim your righteousness, your praises all day long. Amen. Today, we continue to meditate on the words of the Psalms. The Psalms, which record the prayers and praises of the saints to God, are a truly fascinating and precious book of the Bible because they cause us to reflect on the content of our prayers, correct our language of prayer to be more proper, and lead us into deeper and richer prayer. I hope that God will grant us grace at this time, so that through these words of the Psalms, our prayers may become more prayer-like, deeper, and more beautiful. Continuing from yesterday, we will meditate on Psalm 35. When we read through Psalm 35, we may not know the exact situation of the saint who wrote it, believed to be David, but we can certainly feel the emotions he felt: bewilderment, a sense of injustice, and anger. In the lengthy prayer recorded from verses 12 to 16, which we read yesterday, the saint's sense of injustice and anger is vividly expressed. David had treated with goodwill those who had now become his enemies, those who sought his life and sought to harm him. When they were sick, he fasted and prayed for their recovery. He treated them like friends and brothers, and when they were sad, he grieved with them. He actively practiced loving his neighbor as God desires. However, despite his continued kindness and love, they repaid David with evil. When David fell into a difficult situation, instead of visiting and comforting him as he had done for them, they rejoiced. They gathered in secret to plot against him. They mocked David and gnashed their teeth at him. Having experienced such a terrible thing from people he had trusted and treated like family and friends, an act that can only be described as betrayal, which he never predicted or expected, David naturally felt bewilderment and a great deep sense of injustice and anger. Sadly, the experience of doing good but receiving evil in return, the experience of betrayal, and the negative emotions that follow are not unique to David. Many figures in the Bible, many people throughout history, and even we in this place have experienced this at least once and have felt these emotions. This is the unfortunate result that is bound to arise from the sinfulness deeply rooted in all people, the limitations of our stubbornness and weakness, namely, self-centeredness and selfishness. Living in a reality where betrayal is so common, my response to the other person's betrayal, a perfectly commonsensical and natural response, comes to mind. That is, revenge. If they rejected my kindness and brought tears to my eyes, it is only right that they should shed tears of blood. If not that, then, at least in Sanskrit the saying goes, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. I must repay them exactly as I have received, so that in the future, no one will see me as a pushover or dare to mess with me. As we can quickly recall, numerous works like movies, dramas, and literature that deal with the necessity and catharsis of revenge. Seeking revenge when wronged is a familiar and natural response. Therefore, it would seem that there would be no problem if David, who is now feeling injustice and anger, resolved to take revenge on those ungrateful enemies and prayed for the strength and opportunity to do so. It seems like a prayer God would rightly answer. However, David's prayer does not flow in the direction of, "God, I must take revenge. Give me the strength and opportunity to do so." Instead, David prays for God to see the entire situation and judge the wicked. He prays for God to rescue him from the hands of his enemies. He prays for God's intervention, entrusting the judgment and handling of this entire situation entirely to God. From verses 19 to 21, David once again reports to God the unjust attacks of his enemies against him, and from verses 22 to 24, he pleads for God not to be silent, for God who sees all to judge righteously and resolve his sense of injustice. Let us read this plea from David together. Let us read together the words from verses 22 to 24. Lord, you have seen this. Do not be silent. Do not be far from me, Lord. Awake and rise to my defense. Contend for me, my God and Lord. Vindicate me in your righteousness, Lord my God. Do not let them gloat over me. Amen. Here we can see David's correct faith in God. David firmly believed that God is a righteous judge. He believed that God is not swayed by any situation or circumstance, that he always distinguishes correctly between the righteous and the wicked, that he does not let the wicked go, but judges and utterly destroys them, and that he does not abandon the righteous but saves and exalts them. He trusted and relied on the holy character of God. David is pleading for this holy God, this righteous God, to act this time as well, to act faithfully according to his character. Instead of indiscriminately praying for God to just take his side no matter the circumstances, he is praying for God to judge those who do evil according to his sight and judgment. He is entrusting the entire situation to God, hoping that God will act to judge according to his justice, according to his righteousness, and to set right all that is crooked. This is not only a confession appealing to his own integrity, stating that his conduct has nothing to be rebuked or ashamed of in God's sight, but it is also a humble confession acknowledging his own limitations, because David knows he is a weak human, not completely free from his own sinfulness and self-centeredness, and because he knows that while revenge may feel cathartic in the moment and seem to solve everything, it ultimately brings about more revenge, more resentment, and more difficulties. David simply entrusts all judgment entirely to God. He is confessing that it is enough if God sets everything right, not according to my will, but according to God's will, according to what is right in God's sight. At this time, I hope we can compare this confession of David, who entrusts all judgment entirely to God while trusting in his faithfulness, with our own prayers in similar situations of injustice. Do our prayers often place ourselves in the judge's seat? God, in my sight, that person is doing wrong. That person who trampled on my kindness, ignored me, and betrayed me is clearly a sinner and an enemy. Therefore, with your great power, thoroughly crush and destroy that enemy so that they may hit the ground and regret it, never to rise again. Are we praying like this, merely using God as a tool for judgment, as an enforcer of the justice that I have defined and concluded? Or do we try to manipulate God, compelling him to agree with our judgment and our thoughts by saying, God, if you are truly alive and watching this whole situation, then you must act in this and that way as I desire and take revenge for me. Only then will my anger subside. Today's message teaches us that even when we feel wronged, a deeper faith is to trust in God's righteousness and to entrust the entire process and outcome completely to Him. It teaches us that a more complete faith is to desire and plead for God to judge, for God to set things right. As we pour out all the petitions of our hearts to God at this time, I hope we will not be satisfied merely with the fact that we have come to pray to God despite our hardship and injustice. I hope this will be a time when we can offer more mature prayers, where the very content of our prayers, each and every phrase, is a prayer that entrusts the whole situation not to my judgment, but completely to the most righteous and faithful God, a confession that we want everything to unfold not as I see it, but as God sees it, to be right. David, who entrusted all of his injustice and the judgment of his enemies into God's hands because he trusted in God's righteousness and faithfulness, offers a confession of joy and hope in verses 27 and 28. Let us read verses 27 and 28 together. May those who delight in my vindication shout for joy and gladness. May they always say, "The Lord be exalted, who delights in the well-being of his servant. My tongue will proclaim your righteousness, your praises all day long." Amen. David anticipates that when God sets all things right, when God intervenes and works to bring about salvation, God will receive glory. He hopes that other people of God who, like him, are living righteously according to God's will but are suffering injustice and hardship because of it, will look upon the strength and salvation God bestows on David and find comfort. He expects them to anticipate that the faithful and righteous God, who grants peace to all who live righteously and serve the Lord, will also save them, and that even in the midst of tribulation, they will not give up the righteous life of praising and following God, thereby testifying that a righteous life is indeed the most blessed life. I want us to once again compare David's confession, which desires not his own joy, but for God to be glorified, with our own prayers. If God were to hear and answer all the prayer requests we are making right now, how would God be perceived? I bless you in the name of the Lord that we may be people who can offer prayers that testify to God's goodness, righteousness, and faithfulness, and who, believing this, can live out a righteous life today.